Well, sitting here with someone you may have heard of, Andrew Klavan. This set is way too nice for an interview with you, I guess.
I think it is. I'm actually out of my league here.
We stepped it up way too much. We got to dial it back a little bit. So you have a book that just came out, A Woman Underground is what it's called. I wanted to talk to you about kind of the creative process, first of all, that goes into writing books, because I'm just fascinated by that. And then some other things. But before we get into that, so what and there's the book right there. Tell us about the book, first of all.
Well, this is the fourth book in the Cameron Winter series, and it's kind of the crisis book. Cameron Winter's kind of unsteady mentally, is kind of cracking up, and he finds that the woman that he loved his whole life, this kind of flame that he's kept, and he's lost track of her. He finds her. He realizes she's still around, and he starts looking for her, and as he starts looking for her, he realizes that a killer is looking for her at the same time, and he has to see if he can find her before that. It also takes place in the midst of riots and extremist politics and kind of an America, like this America, but a little bit dialed up. So it's not a political novel, but it's a novel that has a lot of politics in it.
So that book's probably, what, 280 pages or so?
Yeah, it's close to 300, yeah.
I've written a few books. None of them were very good, but nonfiction, and I want to talk about that too, because we were talking off air a little bit about nonfiction versus fiction. I can't even wrap my head around writing a novel, like writing a story. I just can't even, I wouldn't know where to begin. And you've written, how many novels have you written?
Over 30, yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't even know how to ask the question exactly, but how do you organize your mind to sit down and start writing that book? Like, what's the actual process that ends with that book sitting there? Well,
you start out a lot of times with a what if. What if this happened? What if, the only woman you ever loved came back in your life but was in trouble? What if you walked in to look at your baby and make sure she was okay and she was gone? What if some wild thing just pops into your head? And you kind of let it just sit, sometimes for years, and until it finds the perfect person to be in the story, which is one of the interesting things about writing a series, is you have to have stories that actually resonate with the character, because you don't care if a guy solves a mystery. You only care if what happens to people internally. So for me, everything has to work as a character thing. So even if I have a fight scene or a chase scene or something, it has to be important to the guy internally, because it's a book, it's not a movie. It's like you can't just watch something and think that's exciting. So as it unfolds, you think, what would happen if this? You usually come up with some kind of ending, and then you start to build the steps that go on. And it's always about the character and the story. For me, it's always like, it's always, why is this hard for this guy to do? Not just why is it hard to do, but why does it challenge this guy? And so Winter is a very psychologically oriented character. He's kind of trying to fix he used to be a government assassin, essentially, and now he's come back to the country, and the country is kind of falling apart. It's corrupt. He starts to wonder, what was I doing? What was I fighting for? And it makes him unravel. So you have to really be dealing with the guy from the inside out, and that's the way it gets built over time.
Do you outline it ahead of time?
I do. Yeah, a lot of people do. A lot of people like just sit down and write, but I know everything I'm going to say before I say it.
How long does it take you to write that?
This one, it takes about a year from start to finish.
Including editing and all that?
Yeah. Including various drafts, yeah.
Yeah. And you've also written, of course, screenplays.
Yep. Takes 6 weeks, and you get paid better.
Yeah, I was going to. So I assume it's a quicker process, because there's a lot less writing that goes into it. But is even like the way you think about it, is that different too? Are you also starting with a what if and building it out, or is it a different? You
do start with that, but first of all, the characters. The first film I ever did was called Shock to the System. It was based on a novel by Simon Brett, and I was a novelist, so I wrote it like a novel. I did long character sketches and what was he going to be like and all that. They hired Michael Caine to be in it, and I saw the first day of rushes, the first rough cut of it, and Michael came home, I thought, what was I doing? Michael Caine creates the character. It's going to be Michael Caine. It's going to be whatever he says it's going to be. So it's much, much easier. It's kind of like building the frame to something, and the director and the actors all put it together. And seriously, if it takes you 6 weeks to write a screenplay, it's probably because you were busy doing something else. It's very few words. It is kind of, every word that appears on screen has to be great. So every line of dialogue has to be great, but the descriptions only have to convince people in Hollywood to buy it. They don't have to be that good, So it's much easier.
What drew you into novels, to writing novels to begin with?
I just loved them as a kid. I just loved them. And like, they formed a lot of my role models, like, you know, for what a guy was like, should be like. Like I started reading tough guy detective stories and Raymond Chandler, Philip Marlowe stories, The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. And those were the kind of guys who kind of spoke to me, because I was kind of living in this suburb, this leafy suburb and everything like this. And I thought, no, these are the guys who like never bend. They never bend. And like Raymond Chandler had this great essay about his character. He invented the phrase mean streets. And he said, down these mean streets, a man must go who is not himself mean. And I must have been 15 when I read that. And I thought, bingo, that's what I want to be like. And so I just started creating stories about those kind of characters. I'm not like that, but I create stories about those characters.
What do you think it takes to be a good writer? What does it require?
The first thing is, some people have talent and some people don't. Yeah, you can just see it the minute you start reading, you know? And like, I always had a gift for it. I always had an ability to do it. And then I did stuff.
If you don't have the talent, you think it's just, there are some people you just don't have it and that's it?
There's some people who have no talent except that they know how to build crappy stories that people will buy, and they make a lot of money. And that's all good, but I can't get past page 3, because the minute I start reading, I think this is garbage, you know? I won't name them, but there are a lot of them on the bestsellers list, you know?
Why won't you name them? Name one.
No, I can't.
Okay.
I can't even name one. But they know who they are.
Well, I don't want to go off on a different tangent, but I think about this a lot too, about talent. Do you think, because this applies in many fields, especially any creative field, and I think I generally believe that it's like you either have it or you don't.
Yep.
And if you don't have it, you never will. Is it possible you don't have it and then to somehow gain it?
No, you know, it's fun. I have this magic touch because I grew up, my father was a famous DJ, and I grew up in radio, and I have a magic ability to hear broadcasting talent. So the first time I heard Shapiro on the air, I actually got in touch with him and I said, you know, you could have a big career. He was on some little, you know, LA station doing a show with 3 people in it. And I said, they should take those other 2 people off the air. You know, you have it. Knowles can pretend to have it. I was just talking to Glenn Beck today. Glenn Beck is the greatest broadcaster alive, you know, and I was, before I went on the air, I was on the phone listening to his commercials. And I was embarrassed that I ever went near a microphone, just listening to Beck work, because he just has this thing. It just comes across the mic. And look, you know, in your movie, I can see it. I can see that you have this way of communicating through the camera. It's just something people have or they don't have. You cannot buy that. You cannot buy it. You can hone it, you know? Like Kevin Costner, it doesn't work very hard. He strolls on and he's handsome.
There are a lot of people these days having a fair amount of success in creative fields, even though they have no talent for them at all.
They suck, yeah. Because we don't reward talent. People reward stuff that fits in with the narrative and all these things. And it's really interesting for me, because the other thing now, after all these years, I can tell a good writer when I see one, and you can read one paragraph and you just think, this is garbage, but it might have something that the audience is going to like. And it is a business, and if you sell copies, you sell copies.
What tells you in one paragraph, so in one paragraph you could tell if someone's a good writer.
Yeah.
What are you looking for in a paragraph?
It's not something you're looking for. It's a kind of magic that just comes across, that the scene leaps to life. You know, one of the things that people keep saying about this is they start it and they can't finish it. They can't. That's because I'm good at what I do, you know, and it's like, you can see it immediately that I'm in the story. I see the things that they're describing and they kind of resonate with me. And then you can see somebody who's just phoning it in or working really hard, but just doesn't have what it takes.
We were talking off air a little bit about nonfiction versus fiction. You were saying it's the challenges of not only writing fiction, but also getting people to read fiction.
Wow, especially on the right, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm totally I'm a culprit here, because I generally only read nonfiction. And I'll go through weird phases. I went through a weird phase like 8 years ago where I just got into Russian literature and I started reading Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
Tolstoy, and then I'm not interested anymore, and then I go on to nonfiction. But I also recognize that that's a problem. I know that there's real value in reading fiction, and this idea that you should only read nonfiction because you're learning about a thing that actually happened, and that there's only value in that. And I think that's kind of the thought process, especially if conservatives only read nonfiction. That's sort of my thought process, but I also recognize that that's not right. What's the value of fiction?
Yeah. Fiction grows your life. There's just no question about it. If you read really good fiction, and it can be genre fiction, be fantasy, mysteries, all these things, if it's really good, it grows your life. You get to turn off all the things that are usually on in life. Your moral sense, your anxiety, your worries about things. All of a sudden, you just can observe the world and experience the world. Fiction is an experience. It's not an actual thought process. You read something and you live it. Somebody dies, you cry. Somebody, murders somebody, you're afraid, you're horrified. So it's an actual experience. And then you have an experience that you would never have had in your life. And you get to live it without having to make decisions about it. And somehow, I've read a lot of fiction, I've been reading it all my life, and somehow you just know life better afterwards. It's an amazing, amazing thing. And conservatives are very, practical people a lot of times, and also very suspicious of people telling them, why are you telling me this if it's not true? And it's really interesting. And men read less fiction than women, and I'm kind of a man's writer. And so it really is a challenge. It's, I've written a couple of nonfiction books, and you can get interviews on every conservative venue there is. They know who I am, they want to talk to me, and here I am talking about a subject, that I have a book, they get that. But if you have a book that's fiction, a story, they don't understand, unless it has a news hook, they don't understand what it's about. There are few exceptions. Glenn Beck is one of them. Glenn Beck reads fiction, so when he talks to you, he actually knows what you're doing. Rush Limbaugh used to read a certain kind of fiction. But most conservative guys are we're moralists. And so fiction is beyond morality. It's kind of a meta thing. The morality you get from it is understanding life better. And so that's a moral enterprise. But fiction can have bad guys who win and good guys who lose and unfair things that happen, and drives conservatives crazy.
What do you say to the argument that the novel has been replaced these days by shows and films, and that's sort of our version of the novel?
Yeah, I think...
Does it have the same value?
No, there's nothing as intimate as the novel. There's nothing at 3:00 in the morning when you're alone, you can actually connect with another mind in a novel, and it's just incredibly direct. Michael Caine creates a character, but now you're no longer reading me. I wrote what he said, but now you're getting it interpreted by Michael Caine. Where you're getting something direct. You're getting a vision of life direct, and it's when you pay attention and when it's done well, it's a remarkable experience. And people who love novels will tell you that you just get carried away in a way you don't anywhere else. And so the novel is now no longer what it was when I was a kid, which was the major form of entertainment. I mean, that's the movies. Actually, even when I was a kid, it was still the movies. But it's still different. It's like theater. Theater is not the main form of entertainment, but there's nothing like going on and seeing a live play, seeing an actor work live. It's remarkable. And there's nothing like picking up a story that's going directly from one mind to another.
Do you think there are any television shows that have almost made it to the level of a novel in terms of the intimacy of the storytelling and the depth of it?
Nothing is intimate, but there are some that have been as complex, like The Sopranos, I think, was up there. When I watched The Sopranos, I knew I was watching a work of art. When I watched a couple of seasons of Game of Thrones, I thought that. TV has just gotten so much better than it used to be. When you go back and look at television, it's amazing how bad it was. And it really has gotten better. But it still hasn't got that utter engagement that you get with a book, for me.
Now, I hate to pay you a compliment, but you're a real writer. You're like an actual, you're a good writer. You're a real writer.
Yeah.
So you're an artist?
Yes.
There's not a lot of company. You don't have a lot of company on the right, especially among conservative commentators. A lot of conservative commentators write books, and 99% of them are just god-awful, terrible. Why is that? Like, why is it so rare?
Actually, this book is a good answer to this question. This is a book in which it's about American life now. And so it has to have politics in it, right? It has to have people on the right and people on the left and the kind of tensions that we're all living with now. You can't write about contemporary America without writing about politics. But the main character has no politics. He doesn't care. It's one of the running gags as people keep trying to convince him of their politics. And he just says, I don't care. I'm just looking for this girl. I just want to find this girl. To do that takes a lot of discipline. You really have to understand what the novel is about, to not tell people what to think, but to let the experience live. And conservatives want to tell you what to think, and so do leftists. That's why so much left-wing art is crap. It's like they want to preach to you about what's right and what's wrong. And I just want each character to sort of make his case in the story. I mean, this has a main character, and you live in his head, but there are a lot of characters, and they're very, very different. And every time one of them opens his mouth, you're getting an entirely different consciousness, an entirely different way of looking at the world. And that's not something like political people are very comfortable with. I mean, it is the way I look at the world. Even when I'm talking about politics, I kind of look at the world like I understand there are people who disagree and see it from a different way and all that stuff. And they should be in prison, of course, but that's not the way I write a novel. When I write a novel, I put it all aside and just let the characters live in the story. And it's hard to do.
Yeah. I mean, and it's true that the extreme left has the same problem, which is why they make terrible art these days.
Yeah.
But also, you don't have to go back that far to find a time when liberals were making great art.
Yep.
At least films and shows and even music. And it does just seem that it's only liberals were doing it. It's like almost all the great artists, certainly in modern American culture, have been liberals, and probably if you go back historically, all the great ones were liberal by their own standards.
Well, but liberal is different than leftist. I think you're right that you have to be liberal in the sense that you allow each person to be himself. I don't know about you, but I always get these letters. How can I convince so-and-so to believe so-and-so? And I think, just leave them alone. Just let them be who they are, which is what art is about in a lot of ways, is letting people, I don't think Shakespeare was a villain, but when he wrote Macbeth, he let Macbeth be this complete person who had motives for what he was doing and a reason for being and a way of looking at things. And so you do have to be liberal in that sense. But there are plenty of political conservatives, they keep their heads down, who have been great art. I mean, Cormac McCarthy, who just died, I'm absolutely positive he was a conservative. And, he never came out about it and all that. I don't know if you saw that thing with Stanley Kubrick, where they were objecting to the fact that Donald Trump used Full Metal Jacket in one of his ads. And Kubrick's daughter came out and said he voted for Reagan. He would have loved Trump, and he just kept it quiet. So there are a lot more politically conservative artists. But you can't be conservative in the sense that you believe there's only one way to live, or that anybody who disagrees. I mean, for instance, I'm an ardent anti-feminist, but this book has a feminist in it who's an absolutely lovely person, and who the hero, who's a very patriarchal guy, he loves her. He thinks she's a wonderful person, even though he can't stand anything she writes or says. And that's kind of, you have to be liberal in that sense, I think, to create art.
Now we got to wrap it up. But how do you think we get conservatives more involved in art?
Well, I've been banging this drum for 20 years. This is why I started talking about this, because when I lived in England for a long time, and I came back and found our culture so sickened and twisted that I was shocked. And so I started giving speeches to conservative groups saying, this is about the movies. This is not about winning elections. This is about talking to people about what life is really like and showing them what life is like. 20 years ago, when I started doing that, they looked at me like I was nuts. They kind of thought I was cute because I was working in Hollywood and I dressed all in black, and they thought wow, this is cool, a Hollywood guy. But they had no idea what I was talking about. Today they do. Today they get it. They still think that what we need is more propaganda movies that will sell, conservatism. But it's starting to change. I mean, look at this place. I mean, you made two cultural things. I know they're nonfiction, but they're still cultural works. Jeremy understands, obviously, that movies have to be, created by people like us. That's the important thing. It's not that we write conservative things, it's that conservatives make stuff, So I think it's changing, and I think I would describe it as a field of ice with little sprigs, popping up through it. So I'm kind of hopeful about it, and I just think you got to keep explaining to conservatives what art is, and the fact that conservative art is not like conservative life. I live a conservative life. I'm a married man, a family man, a religious man. I, love my country. That's the life I live. But that's not what art is about. Art is about dramatic things that happen because of clashes of personality. And that's a very different thing. And it's like I said, it enlarges your life. The people who wrote the Constitution and the Declaration read Shakespeare, they read, Euripides, they read the Greeks, they read art. That's why they had that broad way of looking at life that helped them to form a government. And if you read the Federalist Papers, those were written by people who understand what people are like, and people like that have read the arts.
Where can people buy the book? Anywhere?
Anywhere. If you get it, you can get it at our shop, the DailyWire shop, so I should say that out of loyalty. If you get it on Amazon and move it up the list, that helps it a little bit.
Good talking to you.
It's always great talking to you. No, thanks. If you loved that, and I know you did, like and subscribe, and also subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show wherever you get your podcasts.